Submission Radio here at the Submission Radio Lounge, post UFC 205 with the man of the hour, Ariel Helwani himself. And Ariel,
I'm the man of the hour? There's no chance that I'm the man of the hour.
well, you have a program called MMA Hour.
I think the pun works on many levels.
Anyway, it doesn't matter. It's been a long night. Ariel, you only have a couple of minutes, and thanks for joining us at the lounge. It's a prestigious place to be. Let's talk about Madison Square Garden for a second. I mean, we've been watching you. You've been wearing your New York hat all week long. You've been loving the vibe. What's it been like for you to see this event go down at Madison Square Garden finally happen after all these years of trying to get MMA legalized here?
I wish I had a better word. I keep saying surreal, but that really is the word. I mean, I'm looking at a picture of Carmelo Anthony right there wearing the New York Knicks jersey. I have dreamt of working at this building. I remember the first time I ever came to this building, March 11th, 1995, to see the Knicks play the Supersonics. This building means a lot to me. I've cried about games that have happened in this building. So to actually be a working media member covering a historic event that, you know, people throw around the word historic and it doesn't really mean anything. This was actually history on many levels, biggest gate, but just the moment of Conor McGregor being the first man to win, you know, a second belt while being a champion in another weight class. I mean, you know, if you've ever been to MSG, there are like moments and pictures all over this great building. That's going to be a picture someday, not that long from now, Conor holding those two belts. So I just feel very lucky that I could be here. And, you know, not that long ago, I was told that I would never be able to be at an event like this. So I'm very thankful that I am here.
We are very glad as well.
Yeah.
UFC 193, you were there, we were there. We spoke about how you have certain moments in your, I guess, MMA career that sort of stand out to you. UFC 167, John Jones Gustafsson, that's one of them. Yep. UFC 193, Holly Holm, 65, yep. Sorry, that's why you're the man. UFC 193, that was another one. Where does this rank for you?
Oh my, you know, it's fresh and you don't want to like get too excited in the moment, but man, this one is certainly up there. You know, just Conor has meant so much to the sport. I think he's meant so much to all of us, and you know, I appreciate him sort of thanking the media because this is a guy who gets it. He's got it every single step of the way. So you know, he's just, for him to have the presence of mind to do this in this arena on this stage, I feel like, and I don't know if you guys disagree, but I felt like he was the biggest star in the sport going into this event. I think now he's one of the biggest stars in sport, period, after this event. Because when you win on Broadway, when you win in New York in front of these people, and you win in that fashion, your star explodes. Like, you're just on a whole other level. And, man, he rose to the occasion. And then he drops the bombshell that he's going to be a dad. And then he drops the bombshell that he wants a piece of the company and he's not coming back until they give him one. I mean, he continues to sort of change the game in front of our eyes. We're going to be I can guarantee you when we're all old men with our grandkids, we're going to be answering questions about what it was like to cover Conor McGregor. So to understand that now is a very special thing. So yeah, it's definitely up there for me.
Last question, we'll let you go. Just on that Conor McGregor announcement, are you expecting to see him fight again? And I mean, I think we all expect to see him fight again, but how soon do you think he can come back and fight again in the UFC?
Well, he said that he's going to be a dad, and you know, I actually love the way he spoke about being a father. As a proud father myself, he was talking about how scary the whole situation was for him, and it was nice to just see a moment of vulnerability from Conor, humility from Conor. Not to say that I don't like the way he is and the way he presents himself, but that was just a very human moment. Everyone can relate to that. So he says that he's going to have, well, he first said March and then he was corrected, which was funny, that it's going to be May. So I don't expect to see him back before that, and certainly not right after that. You know, how about this, okay? This man was giving me crap for saying that, you know, I didn't want to come, I'm too tired.
Rightfully so.
4:15 in the morning. The reason is my kids are going to wake up in an hour and I'm going to have to get up and be with them. But I'll give you a scoop. How about that?
All right, let's do it.
This is an exclusive. This is a Submission Radio exclusive. I'm told that the return to MSG is already sort of penciled in. It's not penned in, but it's penciled in for around this time next year.
Wow.
So we have Brooklyn, and already they have the Encore. And I wouldn't be surprised if the Encore is headlined by Conor McGregor, because it actually works out perfectly with this timeline of taking a break, sitting down, pressing pause, and seeing what happens. I know the lightweight division and featherweight division won't like that. But, you know, if you're trying to think about when the UFC might come back to MSG, look around November 2017 as of right now. Things can change, of course, but that's what I'm hearing as of right now. So there you go. Wow. Who's ever broken news in the lounge before? No one.
Wow, look at that. And Ariel, before we go, just from the bottom of our hearts, we do want to congratulate you on your daughter being born as well. We didn't get a chance to do that on the program. Ariel is the man, no matter what he says about me busting his balls.
Well, it's funny. He asked me to come on the show the day my wife was giving birth, and I don't like to talk about those things, unlike Conor. And I was like, nah. And I was figuring like, oh, they must be, mad that I turned them down or whatever. But I hope you understand now that I had a pretty good excuse.
Listen, man, we're huge fans of yours. Thank you so much,
Same
and congratulations
Same here.
on this moment. It was awesome just to see you there and sort of share it with you a little bit. Thank you so much.
Thank you guys. All the best. The lounge is awesome. I mean, I feel like you can do it up a little bit with the lighting here, maybe the camera, but otherwise it's great. And I'm honored to be here, even more honored than I was covering this event.
All right, guys, Miesha Radio here with Brett Okamoto of ESPN. You need very little introduction. You have covered the sport for so long, and you've been to so many of these events. Where does UFC 205 rank? What's your sort of biggest takeaways?
I saw Dana immediately after, and we were just right before I interviewed him. We have, like you said, we've done this over the years. I'll see him in the back and just say, wow. I mean, the sport just delivers. It truly does. And I mean, I know this is coming from a guy who covers it, so I'm supposed to say that. But I mean, how can you leave this arena, disappointed at all in what you saw? And what I told him was, I think Madison Square Garden got its first classic. With Woodley and Thompson, and then it got its first real mega superstar performance out of Conor McGregor, and it got it out of the co-main and the main of his very first card. So I thought it was a special night just based on everything that went into it, and then the fights delivered even more on top of that.
We don't have you for long, so we have to jump right into it. The big announcement from Conor McGregor was, of course, that his girlfriend was pregnant, which we were able to figure out by looking in the octagon. Then he goes on to talk about the fact that bringing a child into the world, he doesn't know if he wants the child to be around the celebrity, doesn't know what's going to be happening next. What was your takeaway from that? I mean, you're a smart guy. How did you read that message?
I think that Conor McGregor, he does two things. Well, he does a lot of things well, but there's two sides of him, right? There's the fighter, and then there's the businessman. And when it's time to be the fighter, he is the fighter. And when it's time to be the businessman, he is a businessman. And I think by saying things like, I could take or leave this sport, if these guys want me to come back, I mean, they've seen what I'm capable of now. He's coming off of an even more successfully financial year than 2015. So he's in a great position to kind of say, if you want me back, I got other things I can be doing. My personal life is calling. So come to me with a real special offer. And it's the business side taking over. As soon as the fight is over, he's looking at business, and as a business, it's always good to remind the other side that you're negotiating with that you don't, maybe necessarily need them. I think that's the message he's sending.
There's no denying that he's always angling for something, and he was doing that tonight. What do you think about these talks about him saying that he wants a part of ownership? He brought up how, the celebrities own the UFC, and, Conor and Brian, all these people have shares and stuff like that. But he said this before about how he wants to be in partnership with the Fertitta brothers. What are your thoughts on that? I
mean, why not? Why not ask for something like that? Now, whether or not he ever in a million years gets that, we'll see. But I think when you're coming off of the year that Conor McGregor does, we talk about this all the time. The fighters need to speak up and ask for what they believe they're worth. And sometimes they do it, sometimes they don't. It's a difficult sport to negotiate, and the UFC is so powerful, and it has been for a very long time. Now you're looking at a fighter who really has stolen the show in a way that we've never seen it take place before. So if he believes that he is owed a part of this company for doing that, you can't really blame him for feeling that way. And like I said, whether or not he gets it, we'll see. But I think it's a smart thing to ask for. Why not?
Well, let's say he does come back and everything gets figured out. What's the game plan here? I mean, Khabib wants to fight him. He's got 2 titles at the moment. He wants to take time off, by the way. And then so you got Tyron Woodley in the background saying, hey, if he wants to give me a contract, I'll sign it. You've got everything that's going on in the lightweight division. There's Nate Diaz. Is there going to be a third fight? If you were looking at what's next for Conor McGregor, what do you think the plan is?
Well, I think that's another thing about what's beautiful about kind of keeping people in mystery and saying, I'm going to take some time off. I'm having a baby. Obviously, I need to take care of that. And then they need to come to me with some options. They need to put out the proposals, the portfolios. It really entice me to say, this is what we want for you. And I'm sure that he's going to have some ideas as well. In terms of the opponent, who he would like, I mean, as a fan, I'd like to see him fight Khabib. I really would. And I think that Khabib would give him a very, very hard fight. I mean, if you want to see Conor McGregor knock out guys then maybe Khabib is not the right guy. I mean, I want to see him in the toughest fights. That's what you always want. You want to see your champions take on challengers. And to me, right now, that's Khabib. And it makes sense. I mean, he doesn't have to go up and wait and fight Tyron Woodley, who's massively bigger than him. I mean, Khabib is his size. To me, that's the fight. But I think, again, he's keeping his options open by not really putting a time frame on when he's going to come back.
It's interesting because we're here in Madison Square Garden. You mentioned how long you've been covering the sport. I mean, you're a legend when it comes to MMA media. You've done so much great work. We're not just saying that because you're in the Submission Radio Lounge, which, by the way, is the place to be. So as we wrap up, I mean, there's a couple of media members, Ariel Helwani, who's from New York, but I wanted to get your thoughts as well. How did it feel like for you? I mean, there's been so many magical moments here. How did it feel like for you to be here, see what happened, and now sort of sitting here in the aftermath in the Submission Radio Lounge, thinking about everything what happened? What thoughts are going through your head right now? What's your reaction to all this crazy week?
Yeah, it's not like something that the UFC was trying to sell by saying that the Madison Square Garden is a big deal, New York is a big deal. It is. I really truly believe that, and I think it's a big deal for different reasons for different people. But for me, of course, like I've wanted to be a sports journalist since I was about 12 years old. And when I came into this arena and I went up, the first thing I did was I went up to the rafters because I had to do some stuff up there for television. And I took a photo of it and I said, I'm covering my first ever sporting event in Madison Square Garden. This is, you talk about bucket list for your life. This was a bucket list item on my career. I wanted to cover some sort of sporting event in this arena. And for it to be a Conor McGregor fight and then for it to happen in the way that it did, it's a memorable night for literally every single person that was involved. And that's not hyperbole or hype. It's just it is what it is. Like, New York is special. Right now, Conor McGregor is special, and it was a great night.
All right, Submission Radio here with a very special guest. We're in the Submission Radio Lounge with Mike Dyce himself from Fansided. You would have seen his great work. Jose Young's also another man that does a great job, and also him and Elias do a great podcast called Extra Rounds. Now that we got all the plugs out of the way, Mike, let's jump to talking about what happened at the show. Now, Casper, Mike, I was just absolutely mind blown by what was happening in the co-main event between Tyron Woodley and Stephen Thompson. Not only was the fight unbelievable to me and what happened in it, but obviously the decision being read out wrong, everybody being confused, so much happened. But before we get to that decision and all of that, I want to get your thoughts first, Mike. What did you think about how Tyron Woodley performed tonight? Because a lot of people believe this was going to be a one-sided performance from Stephen Thompson.
I kind of expected Woodley to get Thompson to the ground more and make that more of a part of his game plan, and he seemed not worried about that at all. And we heard it talk about it in the post-fight press conference when he was backing into the cage intentionally. A lot of us felt that he was in danger there, but that was actually a place he wanted to be to put himself in position to charge to Thompson. So we all expected him to come out with a different game plan than he did. I mean, it worked for him, so...
I was kind of surprised about it because this is a very sort of vintage Tyron Woodley thing. He's done that plenty of times in other fights where he backs up, he tries to lure people in because they think he's in trouble, and then he turns the tables. He takes them down or hits them with a big punch. I was surprised to see, Stephen Thompson, a guy who sort of studies his opponents, really play into that. What went through your mind, though, when that decision was read out, though?
When I heard the decision, I was kind of surprised that that there were some draws on it. I've had Thompson winning the fight. I felt that he won 3 rounds to 2. I can understand why that one round would be a 10-8, but there was just so much chaos. There was Bruce Buffer leaving the cage. We thought the mic was done. Then he was going to check on it. Supposedly he was going to check and make sure the decision was read correctly.
Change his wardrobe.
Yeah, well, he did do that. And then he raised the decision as a split decision instead of a majority draw. And there's just chaos. And there was the moment where they stop it, and Joe Rogan's turning to Bruce Buffer because they're going to clarify things, and you can see the look on Tyron Woodley's face. It's almost this look of fear, like you're not about to just give this to Thompson after awarding it to me. Mm-hmm. And Duke Rufus kind of whispered in his ear, calm him down. Joe Rogan did a really good job of calming him down in that moment too, and easing his nerves. But, it was just chaos, and I think it should have been cleared up when Buffer went out there. So
you feel bad for Bruce Buffer because he's kind of looked at as the new Steve Harvey, but it wasn't really his fault. It was the commission's fault.
It wasn't really his fault. It wasn't like Steve Harvey where he just read the card wrong. And Bruce Buffer, if you ever look at the cards, he's very meticulous about the way that he organizes the information on there.
Sometimes even.
Yeah, for charity. So, it wasn't his fault. He kind of gets the brunt of it because he read it wrong. Should he have known that it was a majority draw, having been in combat sports for so long and reading the scores? Sure, but ultimately, it's not his fault.
Let's go around the lounge for a second and talk about what's next, because Dana White was talking about it a little bit. We were talking a little bit about it after the fights, the rematch. Do we believe that this fight warrants an immediate rematch, or do we think that maybe, I don't know, Damian Maia deserves a shot and Stephen Thompson maybe waits or fights someone else? Obviously, Robbie Lawler's still in the picture there. How are we playing this out? How do we want to do it? We'll go with you first, Mike. What are you thinking?
Okay, Robbie Lawler's kicked down the line. He's got to wait for the Stephen Thompson situation to be resolved and Damian Maia to get a shot. Damian Maia might have to wait because I feel like this is inconclusive. Woodley walks out as champion, but he didn't necessarily win. So I think it's still unanswered. And I think if there's ever a situation for a challenger to get an immediate rematch in a fight that they didn't walk out as champion, this is the situation.
But do you think that if he waits around, I mean, Casper, we've seen this happen time and time again. People wait around for the title shot, and then when it comes around to the title shot, people have forgotten about what they've done. Do you think that there's a possibility that Maia might have to fight someone else, maybe even a guy like Robbie Lawler, to really warrant that shot?
Yeah, no, definitely. I definitely think Maia will probably have to fight again. I mean, if he's going to wait, he might be sticking around potentially a year. And like Mike said, there is no way that Tyron Woodley can go and fight another fight despite the fact that he didn't actually defend the belt. It was a draw. In theory, Stephen Thompson is just as much the champion as Tyron Woodley is at the moment. They have to finish, it's not a trilogy yet, but they have to do a rematch. I don't care if it was, say, a close fight. Whoever won, I don't think there would have been a rematch. But the fact that it's a draw, they have to do a rematch.
And to your point about forgetting about Maia because he has to wait, Woodley didn't fight for, 18 months before he got the title fight with Robbie Lawler? Now, he was supposed to fight in between. Johnny Hendricks pulled out of UFC 192 because he couldn't make the weight. So there is a little bit of that risk, but we've seen that the UFC is willing to let fighters wait and then reward them with a title shot. So I think Maia could sit out and still be awarded.
One of the things when I think about Woodley, and I can't really figure out my thoughts on it just yet, but I want to sort of talk it out in the lounge, is this whole Conor McGregor thing. How do we feel about that? If McGregor says, hey, I want to fight for the welterweight title, it looks like he's trying to set something up. He doesn't do things without a purpose. Are we interested in seeing the fight? Is the size difference too much? I've spoken to some media members who say it's a ridiculous fight. I've spoken to some media members who say they want to see the fight, and there's a good chance that Conor McGregor might actually do all right. Your thoughts, Mike, and your thoughts, Casper, on if you're interested in seeing the fight and if you actually think Conor McGregor has a shot if the fight happens. We'll go to you first, Mike.
I think it is ridiculous, but I do want to see it. And I've learned time and time again to not doubt Conor McGregor. He's proven to be very capable with game planning. He's also proved to be very patient. He relies on his counter punches. We saw it with Aldo, we saw it with Alvarez. He waits for them to come in, and then he counters and delivers these shots. Tyron Woodley's going to need to lunge forward to overcome the reach, just like he did with Thompson. So I think that could play into McGregor's hands. The issue, though, is I don't think that McGregor is going to be able to knock Woodley out. Woodley has a better chance of knocking him out, and then it's going to come down to a cardio situation. Who can survive later into the rounds if McGregor doesn't get knocked out early?
See, I don't hate this fight. I understand why people are calling it ridiculous, but I just think, look, let's go back to what's important here. He's a lightweight champion, and he's a featherweight champion. Go rematch Aldo. Go fight other guys in the lightweight division. Khabib's there. Tony Ferguson's there. You've got Anthony Pettis. You've got Max Holloway. There are too many contenders in those divisions. I mean, they've both in a lot of ways been held up enough. I think this whole, Tyron Woodley matchup, even though in theory it'd be great for Woodley and it would be right up his alley because he is chasing title fights, big money fights, I think we need to get back to lightweight and featherweight. So I think if it's going to happen, have it in the future.
But the thing about McGregor is he wants to be that first UFC fighter to win a title in 3 different weight classes.
Sure.
This was such a huge goal, and now he's accomplished it. So what's next for him? What's the next thing that he has to pursue and move forward? So this is going to be on his radar because nobody else has ever done it before. Hopefully, it's not in the immediate future because I agree with you. I think he needs to go and defend the 145-pound belt. I always felt like the 2-weight champion thing wouldn't really be cemented if he didn't defend it. If you won the lightweight title and then vacated the 145-pound belt without defending it, I think it kind of just becomes more of like an asterisk on it, so to speak. So I would like to see him spend some time defending both belts before pursuing the welterweight belt. But I think at some point he's going to.
Do you think it's possible, because we spoke about sort of, dropping one title, do you think there's a possibility where he actually does pull it off and defend both titles?
I think it's possible. I could see him defending 145 like one more time and then dropping it. So I think it's possible. I think that's what he wants, and we've seen that he has a lot of leverage in these bargaining situations, and he seems to get what he wants.
I'm confused there because, I mean, at this post-fight press conference, it seemed like to me he was going to be taking a break. I mean, can he hold on to 2 titles? If he takes a break, I'm a little bit confused. I'm not sure what's going to happen. Well, last thing before we let you go, Mike, because we know there's a bevy of strippers and good times waiting for you after this, and this is the lounge, the place where fun is made. GSP comes back, guys, right? For example, does he trump Wonder Boy? Let's say GSP signs the contract, everything gets done. Does he jump over Wonder Boy, and does he get the next title shot? What happens with GSP if he comes back?
I think Thompson deserves the title shot, but if GSP comes back, I think he gets the title shot. GSP and Thompson are friends. They would prefer not to fight each other. So I think you need to give GSP the shot at Woodley before Thompson, because if Thompson wins the belt, it could affect what you do with Georges St. Pierre when he comes back, because he might not want to fight Thompson.
What about you, Casper? What do you think happens if GSP comes back?
I still can't get past the fact that this was a draw. It was a classic fight, and that's the thing. It's one thing if it's a draw and it's just an average fight where no one was really that dominant to the point where they can decide who wins. But this is a really, really good fight. As a fan, I want to see this more than a GSP Woodley or a GSP Wonderboy fight. I think they need to resolve this and then they move on to GSP, because theoretically, if GSP comes back, it's going to be a big fight no matter what, whether he's fighting for a title or not. It's like when Anderson Silva fights or Nick Diaz fights. They're events in on themselves. You can still build a huge pay-per-view and an event around a GSP comeback. It doesn't even have to be for a title. So I'd rather see a resolution to this and then move on to GSP.
And I'm curious if this whole welterweight thing with McGregor may lead to this GSP McGregor fight, because if you have GSP becoming champion, it kind of seems like, I want to have a shot at welterweight. Well, it seems like the UFC might jump at that fight. But, I mean, we'll have to wait and see what happens. Before we let you go and leave the lounge, Mike, your top favorite moment from tonight. Give us one. Stands out in your mind, and don't feel peer pressured by the lounge. I know it's a spectacular sight, but you have to be honest to yourself when you answer this question.
I mean, the easy moment to pick would be McGregor winning both belts, but I won't go that route. You saw my Jerry Maguire list. I like to go, a little bit out of the picture. I really think Raquel Pennington winning. She lost to Holly Holm by a split decision. A lot of people felt like she won that fight. She beat Miesha Tate. It was a huge moment for her, and I think it's kind of overlooked in a huge spectacle of an event. But it was a big moment. It was one of the storylines I was interested in watching coming into this, was the rise of Raquel Pennington and its challenge, and can she meet it? And she did successfully, and she did very well. That was a dominant performance.
All right, guys. Adam Hill of the Las Vegas Journal, a Submission Radio alumni, here in the Submission Radio Lounge tonight, talking to UFC 205. There have been a lot of monumental things. Obviously, Conor McGregor winning 2 belts, the infamous Steve Harvey moment of Bruce Buffer. Let's talk about something else. Let's talk about Miesha Tate retiring out of the blue. I mean, did you ever, for in a million years, think this was going to happen tonight with the loss to Raquel Pennington?
No, well, first of all, I didn't think she was going to lose to Raquel Pennington, so I didn't think that would be part of the equation. Listen, Miesha has said for a long time, and she's a Las Vegas girl. She's been there for a while. You talk to her around the city and around Extreme Couture, and you know that she doesn't want to do this for a long time. She's always said, I don't want to do this into my mid-30s. I don't want to be in my late 30s, still fighting. She wants to have a family, all this other stuff. So, yeah, I thought she was going to retire at some point soon. This seems early. This seemed like an emotional reaction to a very bad performance. I don't think she did anywhere close to what she wanted to do. She didn't come out firing on all cylinders at all. She came out firing on no cylinders, really. Very disappointing performance, and I think she just reacted and said, I'm done. I can't compete anymore. I'd be surprised if that holds. I know that she doesn't want to do this for very long, but I know that I've heard, things have gone on in her camp. There's been, some turmoil and things like that around. So I think all of that really hit her, and she didn't perform like she wanted to, and I don't think this is going to be a lasting retirement.
It's interesting that you mentioned that you don't think it's going to be a lasting retirement. I mean, Dana White was really funny out at the post-fight press conference mentioning how she told him that she doesn't have to listen to him, he's no longer her boss, and she's now going to the hospital. But do you think there is a chance that we may never see a fight again?
No, there's a chance, for sure. Like I said she doesn't want to fight for very long, and maybe she looks at it and says, I got my title. That's what I wanted. I pursued it for a long time. She had a very disappointing performance against Amanda Nunez, and I think that affected her today. I think she could go back and look and say, I couldn't gear up for my fight against Nunez. I couldn't gear up for this fight. I couldn't do what I wanted to do. I don't want to do this much longer anyway. I achieved what I wanted to achieve. I won that title. What else is there? So I think there's certainly a chance, but I don't think it's that likely. I think that it's something that she goes back and looks at and says, she's still a very talented fighter. She's still got a lot left in her. So I think that it's more likely than not that she fights again. Certainly possible that she doesn't, but I think this is just a really emotional reaction.
It's a crazy situation. I agree with you. I think doing this sort of, not only, we're not talking about a post-fight press conference, we're talking about in the octagon, literally as it happened. I mean, if this is something that's been rolling around in her mind, then fair enough. But I kind of think it's like the worst decision you could make.
Well, let's have a think, because it was rolling around in her mind around UFC 193. Remember, we spoke to Dana White about it, and he said if she's thinking of retiring, then she should retire. I wonder how long. I mean, you're going to say that she was using it as a ploy to get that title shot, but you never know. There could have been some truth to the matter. I'm curious, Adam, because you're a Las Vegas native, and you've known sort of Miesha and a lot of the fighters in Vegas for a while. You've mentioned that you expected her to retire sort of soonish, but did you hear rumblings that she was going to retire back in those days? Was it just a marketing ploy? And I mean, in your mind, did you know that it was going to happen sooner rather than later? Because you mentioned that you thought it was going to happen, but I'm just curious if there was any sort of, I suppose, clues that you could find being in Vegas and knowing the team so well.
No, and when I say that it was going to happen, I was thinking 33, 34 years old. She's 30 right now. So yeah, I think that it was going to happen in the next couple of years. I don't think she's going to fight for a long time. But no, I mean, you heard the same thing that she said before that fight. I might retire because she doesn't want to do this forever. She's getting to an age where she wants to have a family. She wants to go do other things. She wants to explore other opportunities that she has. So it's not like she wanted to do it for a long time. So if she's not going to get a title, why not step away? She really wanted to get that title. She did. So now she's accomplished that. So I think there's more of a chance now than there was before. But as far as her retiring, it was just the stuff that she said publicly. And I think that was more just frustration than anything. And I think this is more, just emotion than anything. So I think that she speaks from emotion. She lets, that kind of run her sometimes, which is not a bad thing. It's, I like to see fighters that are open, but I think she'll go back and take a step back, and maybe she follows through with this, and maybe she also says, you know what, maybe that was emotional. I should keep going and see if I can accomplish something more.
Anytime somebody says, like a fighter says they're going to be retiring, one of the big questions is, what are they going to be doing afterwards? You mentioned she's young, and that's a question a lot of people have been asking as far as Ronda Rousey goes, because, she's going to be retiring soon. You look at Ronda Rousey and think, all right, well, maybe she'll pursue Hollywood, and, there's going to be a demand. What about Miesha Tate? I mean, have you had any kind of insight on what she might do? If she's thinking about retirement, you would think surely she's entertained the possibilities of what she will do. Can you see her doing anything, in particular?
Well, she just did that movie, and I know, I talked to her.
High value.
Yes, it was. Listen, it wasn't the greatest movie that's ever been made. I don't know if you guys got a chance to watch it. I personally loved it. I thought it was hilarious. I don't know if it was supposed to be, but it was. But Miesha really liked it. I know that she did because I talked to her about that, and she really, really enjoyed doing it. So I don't know if there's other opportunities for her out there, or what she might want to explore with that. But if that's even a possibility, I think it's something that she would certainly explore. And I know she works with KHI, that's her management, Kevin Harvick, and there's just things out there. Not that you should race a car or anything, but they have contacts outside the fight world and other things. So I wouldn't be shocked if there's other things that are lined up for her. Listen, she's a young, smart, attractive woman. There's a lot of stuff she could do, and we'll see what she does if she wants to go forward. But I think that she does have something left as a fighter.
Casper mentioned Ronda Rousey retiring, so we'll finish off on this. Ronda Rousey, let's say, loses to Amanda Nunez, retires. Miesha Tate retired. How much of a hit is this to the division? Because, you sort of have two of the biggest stars. It wasn't that long ago that Miesha Tate was headlining UFC 200. Now that she's gone and then Ronda Rousey goes, how much does this hurt the division?
Well, it hurts, but I think one of the things Ronda did is brought the division up, where everybody had to chase her. Everybody brought their skill level up. There's not the marketable people that were there before. Ronda Rousey and Miesha are certainly very, very marketable compared to somebody like Amanda Nunez, who's a great fighter. I don't know how marketable she is, but the talent level has risen. So I think you'll have stars emerge. And I don't know how soon Ronda will be done. She has this fight coming up. She said she's going to not be too much longer for fighting. I'm sure she has a couple fights left in her, and whoever she fights can become a star. So I think that the talent level has risen, and that's the most important thing. And so we'll see stars emerge from there.
To me, Amanda Nunez, she's an amazing fighter, but she kind of, in some ways, has similar characteristics career-wise to Renan Barão. Phenomenal fighter, but maybe doesn't have the connection with, say, the English-speaking fans, maybe not the most marketable. But, as we always say about pro wrestling, if you fight the big names, you get the rub. And like you mentioned, if Ronda Rousey retires after, a loss to Amanda Nunez, well, that's one star gone. But Amanda Nunez at the same time gets the rub as, the one who beat Ronda Rousey, and her stock and star power rises.
Well, who beat Rousey and Nunez? Who could have come off those two back-to-back fights. And she's got a good story, and she's somebody who is just a really genuinely good person. That doesn't always translate to being marketable, but, certainly I think that's a fair comparison with Barão, except I think Nunez is trying. And I think she's trying to make a connection, and she's been doing a lot of media, so she's trying to make that push to take it to the next level. So I wouldn't be surprised if she's able to jump her star power up. But like I said, there's definitely people out there that can become stars from that division, and we'll just have to see if they can keep pushing some of those people and somebody emerges.
What a crazy time to be an MMA fan. Adam Hill, thank you so much for joining us, guys. Make sure to check out his great work. And I'm excited to see, guys, if Miesha Tate fights again or not, because if she doesn't, wow, what a year. UFC 200 and now gone and retired from MMA. Obviously, it's a reaction video. We've had a lot of great guests on. We've spoken to a lot of people, but we've got to give our reactions as well. That's how it works. It's what we do. It's what we enjoy doing to you fans. And Kaz, it's been a crazy whirlwind. We don't have hours to talk about this. Where should we begin? I don't think we really touched on this yet. Khabib Nurmagomedov putting on a display against Michael Johnson. Striking-wise, I have to say, I wasn't impressed with what I saw from Khabib. He's got a bit of work to do with his striking, I believe. There's a few gaps, a few opportunities, but grappling-wise, you could not see any ring rust. He looked better than ever. What was your analysis on his performance and sort of where he stands now?
I tweeted this out, and it was basically a gif of the Hulk smashing Loki in the Avengers, and that's basically how dominant this fight was. On the ground, what is there to say? I'm not going to be the best analyst to break down all the subtle and small and intricate little things that he did. You were there, you were breaking it down, and you did a great job. But in one word, it was extremely dominant. But you mentioned that early goings where Michael Johnson looked really good. He applied a lot of pressure, and he tagged Khabib, and he actually hurt him on the feet. And I'll tell you this, right? Here's a segue from Khabib to Conor McGregor. I think Khabib definitely deserves the next title shot. I'm eating in my own words here. I said Tony Ferguson on the show deserves the next title shot. When you go out and you cut a promo like that and you sell the fight the way he did, and then you come in the back in the media room and you sell it the way he did, he undoubtedly deserves the next title shot. But I think he is the easier fight compared to Tony Ferguson. I think a guy like Khabib Nurmagomedov, Conor McGregor can come in, he can pressure him, and he can hurt him on the feet. If Michael Johnson can do it, I think Conor McGregor can do it. I think a guy like Tony Ferguson, who's a tall guy, rangy, has got a good jab, and he gets hit, but he deals very well with pressure. I think that's the hard fight for Conor McGregor.
Yeah, it's interesting because we were talking to Owen Roddy before in the back, and we were talking about how Khabib has said that, Conor's a chicken, he's afraid, and it didn't look like Tim McGregor was afraid at all of fighting Khabib Nurmagomedov, and I think you bring up a good point. There is that hole with the striking. Now, to me, the issue with the striking is it looks like boxing to me. It doesn't look like MMA striking, and the problem with boxing striking and the stance that he takes and the way that he sort of uses one hand to block is it's not made for kicking, which is a big problem, and he gets not only that, but there's a lot of holes in his game. I think that after this performance, I'd like to see him, Javier Mendez, and his team really address this situation because, let's be honest, today he destroyed Johnson with the grappling. There's no doubt about it. But the fight could have ended differently. I'm curious, Cass, the incarnation that we see of Khabib Nurmagomedov now, how do you think he does against Tony Ferguson if they do end up fighting?
I think that's a tough matchup. As we saw with I guess the thing is Michael Johnson and Tony Ferguson, they're both wrestlers. They both have the wrestling backgrounds. They both have very good takedown defense. Khabib, he's a great grappler and he's a good wrestler. He does his best work in the clinch. So if he can back Tony Ferguson up against the cage and he can, go to work, he can take anybody down. Tony Ferguson, Conor McGregor, we saw him do it with Michael Johnson. But I think if Tony Ferguson sort of stays at range and he tries to pick him apart, use his jab, and Tony's probably going to have to really, put a lot of pressure on Khabib because we saw with Michael Johnson, that's kind of the kryptonite. If you give a lot of pressure to Khabib, you can hurt him. Tony's got the knockout power. He is by far the better striker. I don't know. That's a tough matchup, and I can definitely see Tony beating him.
Yeah.
And we've discussed this before when we spoke about why this would be such an exciting fight. Khabib, I don't know if Tony can really match. He can't match him on the ground, but we saw against a guy like Danny Castillo who wanted to out-grapple him. Now, I understand the grappling is very different between Danny and Khabib, but Tony is a guy who will always fight from bizarre angles and take bizarre opportunities. He'll throw elbows from the bottom and things like that. So that's a really intriguing matchup.
Yeah, it'll be interesting to see what happens with him next. And he had some tickets near the front row. We're talking to his manager about it.
Khabib did.
Yeah, Khabib did. And I'm surprised nothing happened. I suppose he had... Maybe he wanted to jump in the ring, maybe not. I don't think the UFC allowed it. We all saw what Conor McGregor spoke about after the fight, how there's the big announcement. But I'm interested to see if he will get the title shot and if McGregor is still going to have his title. But before we talk about McGregor, we have to quickly give our thoughts on the Tyron Woodley and Stephen Thompson fight. Now, wow. I mean, when we spoke about this on the show, I said Woodley had a good shot of hitting Thompson early and hurting him. We saw that happen. Thompson got hit quite a lot in this fight. It happened very differently from what a lot of people thought. And I was very impressed with Tyron Woodley for a lot of the stuff that he did. What was your takeaway from him? Because, you've said before there's two types of Tyron Woodley. What kind of Tyron Woodley showed up tonight? What was your takeaway from it?
Well, it's funny because what I said was you either get a, freakishly scary Tyron Woodley who goes in there, destroys his opponents, or you see a Tyron Woodley who, gets picked apart round after round. And this is kind of like both of them in one fight. You had in the first round, the scary Tyron came out, won that round, hurt Stephen Wonderboy Thompson like we've literally never seen anyone hurt him or hit him before. Second round is actually a really close round, but I gave that to Wonderboy. Third round, Wonderboy picked him apart. He got a lot of shots on him. And then the fourth round, we saw the scary Tyron Woodley come back, and he, topped his performance in the previous round, and he almost finished Wonderboy Thompson. Fifth round, again, reverted back to sort of, the Tyron that gets kind of picked apart. I'm not trying to take anything away from Tyron. Actually, I was phenomenally impressed with, the way he scouted out Stephen Wonderboy Thompson, the way we spoke about the range and how this is going to come down to the range, which is Wonderboy's domain. It is one of his best assets. And Tyron, in a lot of ways, he beat him in that area. He frustrated Stephen Wonderboy Thompson a lot. The story of Wonderboy's fights are his opponents stay on the outside, they get frustrated, Wonderboy capitalizes. That's basically what happened in this fight. Only Tyron was, the one winning it. So this is just a crazy fight. And for the record, I had it scored a draw well before, Bruce Buffer, Steve Harvey, the situation, before the commission screwed up. And I think a draw was the right decision. What did you think?
Yeah, I agree. I thought it was a draw. Casper giving me the mic in the Submission Radio Lounge, double mic. You never cross mics, Cassie, but do you? It just happened. Anything can happen in the lounge. The media room, when that happens. Such personalities like Luke Thomas, Dwayne Finley, these kinds of guys, we're all just going crazy in the media room. Just outraged at what was going on. How could the UFC not see this? But I just want to add something about the fight.
Could you imagine if that correction wasn't made?
Yeah.
It was pretty late.
It would have been brutal. And let's not forget, a lot of casual fans watching this, they're not going to be watching the post-fight press conference. They're going to walk away thinking that Woodley won. And I think, that's a big slap in the face.
Just on that moment, it's one thing to sort of, make a mistake. Like, at least with Steve Harvey, he corrected it instantly. But Joe Rogan got as far as to talk to Tyron Woodley about the victory that he had, and only then they corrected it. Just brutal.
I love Joe Rogan though, but why wouldn't Joe Rogan know as well? It's just a very simple thing that most fans know. And here's the thing. When you're doing the broadcast and you got the earpiece, you sort of have to follow what people say.
Yeah.
And you're exhausted, and he's used to a system, so I can see how he oversaw it.
I don't think Joe Rogan didn't know. I think he knew. But
he just sort of played.
I think he was just... Well, you could see it on his face. He was kind of like, what am I going to ask? This is very bizarre. But because Bruce Buffer announced it, what if the mistake was on somebody else's end? And what if Joe Rogan went into business himself and kind of went guerrilla style and just went, hey, this is all wrong. And then, he got in there, oh, wait, I'm wrong? Okay, never mind. You are the winner. So it's good the way that he did it. And he kind of calmed down the situation afterwards. But
it's interesting as well because we've seen sort of Joe go off the cuff and just ask things that he wants to ask. So I'm interested, how he didn't go with that. But also, Bruce Buffer getting a lot of flack. He doesn't deserve the flack. He went out there. It seems like he double checked. They told told him to go on and to make that announcement. One takeaway from the fight, I think Woodley made a big mistake when he went for that guillotine. He tied out his arms. I really believe if he kept striking, if he kept hitting Thompson, he could have stopped him in that round. But, I mean, what can you say? That guillotine was tight. And I don't know how Thompson didn't tap from it. It looked very, very good to me. So
I don't know how he wore those strikes. I mean, he
Yeah.
weathered a massive storm from Tyron
he's
Woodley.
an unbelievable beast. Quickly, we spoke about it with the guest. Let's just quickly confirm it one more time. We want to see the rematch.
That's the fight that has to happen.
This is-
I
needs to
don't care. I
happen.
don't care GSP. I don't care Nick Diaz. Those are all great fights. I want a resolution.
Yeah.
And to be honest, as media, we're not allowed to be in the arena. You know, you and me, Cheeky, we snuck in. We were in it amongst it. All the fans for the co-main and the main event. Everybody unanimously was happy when the draw was announced, and they wanted to see a rematch.
Sure.
Everybody. It's the fight to make.
Yeah, that's right. And it's nice to sit with the fans, sometimes go around the hallways, get a feel for it. So I'm happy we're able to chat to some fans and get a feel for it. Let's quickly jump to the main event. I mean, there's some other stuff to talk about, but let's talk about the main event because we are running out of time. Conor McGregor versus Eddie Alvarez absolutely blew my mind. I was leaning towards possibly picking Eddie Alvarez in this one. A lot of things pointed to the fact that if these guys got in an altercation, they were hitting each other, possibly Eddie could hit him and stop him, or if he stuck to his game plan, he could wrestle him, he could be strategic, he could wear him out over 5 rounds. But I still went with McGregor. I still went with that early knockout. I still can't believe my eyes. I still can't believe what happened. What was your takeaway from the performance? And the fact that Conor McGregor was able to make Eddie Alvarez, who's fought the best of the best, look like that tonight.
It's a crazy situation. I mean, we were speaking to Simon Head before, who, obviously does the Brit Pack, which is a great show, great podcast. You guys should check it out. And I said how, in a lot of ways, this was Conor McGregor's Anderson Silva moment. I mean, he's sort of stuck between his bravado and his personality and his, trash talking, all that kind of stuff. It's always outshined his skill. He's a guy who's sort of somewhere in between. And there's a lot of people who say, he sucks his all trash talk. That's not true. There are other people who say, he's a god and he's untouchable. And that's not true either. He's somewhere in between. But he's a very, very, very good fighter. And, I mean, this isn't hype when I say this was like an Anderson Silva moment. I mean, he came out there, he completely dominated. It wasn't competitive in the least. I mean, the wrestling that we talked about, the clinch against the cage, it really wasn't a factor. Eddie, it's not to say that he had his moments, but he had his opportunities. He had the fight where he wanted it. He had Conor against the cage. He wasn't able to do anything. He threw strikes. He wasn't able to do anything. I mean, this was almost like a flawless performance. There were moments where Conor McGregor is standing there with his hands behind his back. He's taunting him. It was reminiscent to me of the Forrest Griffin fight versus Anderson Silva, where he's just looking almost untouchable, and then he's, dodging punches, and then he just drops him. And fair play to Eddie Alvarez, who's obviously extremely tough, and he got dropped multiple times. I think somebody in the media room said he got dropped 6 times. That's amazing that he actually came back, but unfortunately, his tools in this fight, they were just all nullified, and they didn't really work for him, and it was just all Conor McGregor. It's one thing to beat Eddie Alvarez. We've seen people do it. It's another thing to do it with such ease.
Two takeaways for me from this fight. Number one, the weight class. I really thought 155 was a great fit for Conor McGregor. He looked good to me. He looked like he had energy. It would just really seem to fit him. Number two, a lot more strategic this time. We're not seeing the same Conor McGregor that fought Nate Diaz. He's not running in just trying to throw bombs. He took his time. He moved back. He threw strategic shots. He didn't just try and rush things. He looked calculated. I mean, I really think for us at Harvey and a bunch of people said it was a quick turnaround. He needed to learn more. What I really think is we see a better Conor McGregor as a result of those 2 fights with Nate Diaz.
I think he learned a lot, and actually that's a very, very good point, because that's one thing that we immediately realized. Like, he had Eddie Alvarez hurt very, very early in the fight, and he jumped on him, but he was so reserved. He was so disciplined, and he was so calculated, and then he dropped him again, and it was the same situation. This wasn't, Vanderlei Silva, jumping on people, or Vitor Belfort, or these other people with this, insane killer instinct. This is a very calculated Conor McGregor. And I think you're right. I think that, we see a very big difference from the guy who fought Chad Mendes and who was egging Chad Mendes on, hit me. And was letting Chad Mendes, a guy who hits incredibly hard, hit him with these bombs, these overhand rights, just, I guess, to prove a point. And then a similar thing with Nate Diaz, and it obviously cost him. This is a very different version of Conor McGregor, and he said at the post-fight press conference that he hasn't hit his prime yet, and I believe it. He's a young guy. We're seeing him evolve and change and better himself in front of our very eyes, and I mean, this isn't nut huggery. I'm curious what the future holds.
Before we leave the lounge, and it's going to hurt me because the Submission Radio Lounge, a part of Madison Square Garden on this historic night, it's going to be hard to leave behind. There's drinks, there's snacks. I mentioned the secret gold from the Knicks, but let's talk about the post-fight press conference because you just mentioned it. He talked about, the big announcement was his lady's having a baby. It's going to be born soon. He sort of made it look like he doesn't want the kid to be born into this celebrity, into this fight life. And then he also said there's some other things, some other issues on his mind, such as the UFC being sold for $4 billion, celebrity owners. Why isn't he a part of it all? How do you digest what he said? How do you digest the message that he told you?
I was speaking to someone, and they're from an Irish source, and I won't say who. We were just shooting the shit, and they said that when Dana White sort of said that Conor McGregor has an announcement, it was because he was asked about dropping the belts, and it was a deflection. And the theory is that there was actually no announcement, and that because Dana White put it out there, it was, Conor McGregor's not the kind of guy to downplay that and say, there's actually no announcement. Conor McGregor's the type of guy who will, let that swell and let that balloon to what we've been asking the last few weeks. And what is this announcement? What is this sort of, that everybody's speculating? And so what it ended up being was that his girlfriend's pregnant. But I think he took this situation, like Mike Dyce said, to, remind everybody that, hey, he doesn't need this. He's got other priorities. And much like Nate Diaz, with the negotiations for Conor McGregor, when he kind of said, look, I don't need this, I can walk away. That's the best kind of strategy when doing negotiations. So whether he does end up, having ownership in the company or whatever, he's in a really good position.
To me, it was also almost a message to the new owners. I had a relationship with Lorenzo, with the Fertitas, and you guys have come along and you haven't had that conversation with me to let me know what's going on. It's almost like he's sending them a message. My question is, I suppose that's going to be answered, is how do they take it? How do they take sort of, I'm not going to say that he's strong-arming them, but this is an agency that deals with huge Hollywood stars, huge production companies. They've been in this situation before with a lot more money involved and a lot more on the line. Do you think these kinds of strategies are going to work with him? Is the fact that Dana White's still a part of the picture, does that mean that he'll figure out a way to get it all together? Or do you think there's a chance that the owners just sort of say, hey, we're not going to play ball unless you come to the table and sort of do things and go about things the way that we want them to go about things?
I mean, we'll see. We see it with GSP where, negotiations at one point sort of fell apart, and you would think GSP, he's a huge star. Everybody expected that he was going to be headlining UFC 206, and now we see it's not going to happen. I mean, at this current time at least. But there are other factors there. George St. Pierre, the theory is that because it's with CAA, Creative, I think, Artists Agency, that's the problem there. Conor McGregor, he's not with another rival agency. But he does hold the cards because he's, a dual divisional champion. And so if they were to, say, try and strong-arm him back and, say, take away both titles and then try and, crown a lightweight champion and a new featherweight champion to sort of cut him out the picture, they'll bode very badly for the UFC. I mean, you can have other champions. You can have, say, a Tony, a Khabib, a Holloway or a Pettis. They're not a McGregor. They may be phenomenal fighters, but they're not going to make you the kind of massive money. I mean, Dana White said that, they broke the record tonight. It's a new pay-per-view record. What does that say about Conor McGregor? You have to keep him happy to keep the company, making money to a certain degree. So one thing's for sure about Conor McGregor is that he's holding a lot of cards right now.
Especially, I think, with Ronda Rousey possibly retiring as well. I mean, it seems like the UFC may need him more than ever. Wow. Crazy event.
Before we sign off, I just got to say, we snuck into the arena. We were there. The crowd. I want to get your thoughts on the crowd, and I'll tell you mine. We spoke yesterday about the weigh-ins, how it didn't really meet our expectations. I kind of think it's too big of an arena to host weigh-ins. You don't feel the crowd. It's not as intimate, and obviously there are not going to be as many people for weigh-ins as there are for fight night, and they're not going to be as excited. I loved this arena. I loved the shit out of this arena. I love the crowd. It is probably my favorite arena I've ever covered an event in. It's so intimate. You've got that iconic ceiling. It sounded great. It sounded better than UFC 202. I think it sounded better than UFC 193, honestly. It was like, for 20,000 people, it almost felt like a small room. I love the viewing lines. I love the lighting. And I love the crowd tonight, to be honest. They were so loud. They were so engaging. When Conor McGregor won, it was by far louder than UFC 193 when Holly Holm knocked out Ronda Rousey. And that was over 55,000 people.
Yeah, look, it was absolutely crazy. What people don't realize is fans actually stood for the full fight. When I was in the arena, everyone around me stood the whole time. I mean, that's a special thing. I don't think I've actually seen anyone do that at a previous fight before. For me, it was just absolutely spectacular. We were in the midst of it when the fans went crazy. We were with the hardcore fans. We weren't with the $50,000 a seat fans. And that's where I like to be for all sporting events. And it was just an absolutely surreal experience. So even though maybe the weigh-ins missed the mark for us, I think this event absolutely delivered. So it was just a spectacular moment. And there's a cliche for us to say that this was, I suppose, a highlight for Submission Radio, being in Madison Square Garden, watching this place as a child, all the pro wrestling events, all the boxing events, the basketball events, and now having our own Submission Radio lounge right in the back. It's been an absolutely fantastic experience. And I almost feel like we've come full circle. We started out fight week. We didn't know what was going to happen, and here we are. We finish out the week in the Submission Radio Lounge. Any last thoughts before we wrap this thing up? Pour one last beer and lock up the lounge till, who knows, Ariel says there's going to be another event, so maybe till then.
I would love to come back in another year, and I would cover any event here in Madison Square Garden. I would cover... I don't know. I would cover anything in
ironing, competitive ironing.
If there was a competitive ironing contest next week, I would literally buy tickets, to come all the way back from Australia to come here and cover the amazing iron off that would be. I don't really have any other thoughts, but I will say, and I have to give credit to UFC 205, it really was an amazing card. And I don't want to sort of put on too much of a pedestal, and I can't say this without really thinking back on all the cards, but it may actually be the best fight card ever in the UFC. Literally every single fight, from the opening fight on the Fight Pass prelims to the main event, the controversy of the Wonderboy Tyron Woodley fight, Miesha Tate's retirement, Khabib and his epic Iron Sheik like promo. Just an amazing night, and I think it's probably the best card not only I've ever watched and as a fan, but also been able to cover.
We're going to let it marinate in our minds, but no doubt about it, history-breaking night here at Madison Square Garden. Submission Radio bar, the lounge, is shutting down. It's closed. Closing time. But before we go and pour that last beer, we want to thank everybody for following us this week. As always, follow us on Twitter at SubmissionAUS. Jump on Facebook and subscribe. A big thank you to Justin, our videographer. We couldn't have done this trip without him. A big thanks to all the listeners. Look at me. It's 5 a.m. in the morning, I think, almost here in New York. And a big thanks to New York. New York has been absolutely spectacular to us. Until then, guys, this is Dennis and Casper saying goodbye from the Submission Radio Lounge at Madison Square Garden.